Buy, sell or rent your property with Century 21 and you could win a brand new 2-bedroom apartment on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. Visit c21win.com.au for your chance to win.
Hello and welcome to Your Property Empire. I'm Nadine Blaney. I'm just filling in for Chris Gray this evening. On tonight's show, CoreLogic data shows the annual capital gain for 2016 was 10.9%. So where exactly does the real estate market go from here? I mean, can it go higher? Will there be a more level playing field between buyers and sellers in 2017? And what influence will banks and regulatory bodies have upon real estate in the next year? All very important questions. And joining me tonight to give me their opinions on our stories, Tom Panos, Head of Real Estate Advertising at News Corp, and Charles Tarbey, Chairman and owner of Century 21 Australasia. So, gentlemen, a bit of a different format here for the program tonight because apparently all's quiet out there in property land, or is it, Tom?
Well, it's quiet in the traditional areas that real estate's hot and bustling, which is Sydney and Melbourne. But Nadine, in areas like the Gold Coast, Noosa, Byron Bay, Cairns, you'll find that they actually enjoy the summer period because they've got a lot of people that visit those areas on holidays, and they do deals, they transact. So I know on the Gold Coast, it's a very strong time of the year. In fact, some of the offices have their mega auctions in late January, taking advantage of the Sydney and Melbourne people that are visiting. So
when do we start getting results in that regard?
Early February is when you start seeing the results of those. A lot of those auctions take place. The biggest of one of those auctions takes place around Australia Day. And we'll get an indication from there. They don't, Nadine, they don't, even though there's a lot of auctions going on, traditionally they do not have the clearance rates of Sydney and Melbourne. And you find that they do a lot of deals post the auction, and that's why the results are normally given out in February, because it allows for a week for them to do what we call post-auction deals. But you are absolutely right. Open for inspections in the core auction marketplaces do not begin till the week after Australia Day. So the big auctions happen from late February onwards, and I can tell you, I mean, I run my own auction company, and I am booked out now. The 18th is a Saturday in February, the 25th is a Saturday, the 4th of March is totally booked out. So I'm expecting a lot of stock to come onto the market.
Would that be a big change then from this time last year, or how does it rate?
It's definitely going to be better for the buyer because there's more stock coming onto the market. That's my feeling. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, what do you think? Because is it very suburb specific where there was a lack of stock coming on, or was it pretty much across the board through 2016? Because it was a theme that kept coming up.
So some areas were affected because of their economies and the mining boom, so they copped it, and it wouldn't have mattered how much stock they had. They couldn't find the buyers, and that's still the case in some areas. But
in the main auction markets?
Yeah, when I talk to offices around the countryside, which I did this morning, every single one, particularly in the Sydney market, said that two things stood out. The buyers are still coming to the open for inspections that they've got currently now, in strong numbers, but they're hesitating. There's a stand back and have a look. And the substantial increase in the number of market opinions that each office has recorded in the first 2 weeks of this month is an indication that there are a lot of sellers out there now that are probably thinking, OK, if I'm downsizing, now's the time I want to do it. If I'm going to be buying a holiday home using equity or selling and going there, now's the time to do it. So those increased market opinions, I rang north, south, the southwest, the northwest sector, eastern suburbs, all said the same thing. A lot more market opinions being called in now.
Well, we know that market opinion is a major KPI in real estate because when you have high levels of market opinions, it basically means that within a month or 2 months later, those properties are hitting the market. So KPIs of market opinions means that if you're a buyer and you're watching the show now, you should feel better than what you did this time last year.
Just as you said before, there are going to be better opportunities for buyers at your auctions because there are going to be more properties coming up for auction.
Correct.
There was a newspaper, not a newspaper report, a television report this morning saying that auction levels were at the lowest they've ever been, and this is based on last weekend. Why would you report something like that, given the fact that only people who probably need to sell or are thinking about selling because nobody else is selling in competition to them?
Yeah.
It was 87 auctions, and they recorded that as one of the lowest auction numbers.
Well, I would say that would be like Bing Lee or David Jones going out saying that they've had the lowest number of heater sales that they've had.
Summer, yeah.
Forget about that fan market. Yeah, okay.
Always come up with something like that, don't you?
When it comes to, I guess one of the other themes for 2016 was, you know, houses versus units and how this is all going to pan out when it comes to 2017. House values rising by 11.6%, unit values up by just under 6%.
Yes.
So is that set to continue in 2017 or perhaps even worsen that divergence?
That's how it should be.
Yeah.
It should have been like that. There was a big shift to apartments in the last couple of years, buyers mainly because they couldn't get residential property with land, so the apartment sales took off and they moved probably higher than they should, and I think that levelling out or that distance between the two has always been there and it's just coming back to where it should be in terms of growth.
Yeah.
Well, you can't, though, drive around Sydney. You can't get from, you know, my home to work without seeing still cranes shooting up in the sky, you know, sometimes 4 or 5 in one little sort of developmental area. So you've got to think that these units are still...
No, you're absolutely correct, Nadine. And extending on what Charles has said, so traditionally in real estate, there was always the view that if you bought a house, you'd get a lower rental return, but it would grow at a much higher rate than a unit, 2 times roughly the rate. And that's what's happening now, where we're saying it's roughly 11% and 6%. What happened last year and maybe the year before is that units, the gap was significantly smaller. In some places, units overtook houses. But now it's gone back to what is the normal level. You buy a unit and you'll get a better return versus a house, but capital gains is going to be stronger with a house. But I think the real concern is what you've just indicated, and that is that we've got tens of thousands of units coming out of the ground every month, and there's going to come a time where people that own a unit that's 5 years old are going to be sitting there saying, we've got no buyers for our property, and that's because all the buyers have bought the brand new ones at the same price. So we're going to see, I think, real challenge and pressure on prices of units, particularly when you look at a suburb that's got a lot of building work going on. That's a clear signal. That's saying to you that there is going to be supply that is going to exceed demand at some point.
So if you are thinking about getting into the unit market, do you just wait for that inevitable or perhaps inevitable drop that we see in prices? Or what do you really have to be wary of and be mindful of when you're looking at a unit right now? Because that still is, you know, the price point that a lot of people can enter the property market.
I don't think it's a drop in price. I think what will continue to happen is that newer sales, newer properties will sell for more. I think people will just hang on. I don't think you should ever wait, particularly in strong capital cities, for the market to change. We've got a population growth that we cannot still support. The only thing that's slowed it down a little bit is that the banks are definitely starting to put pressure on. They put interest rates up themselves without the RBA.
We just saw that today with the NAB.
So those sorts of things are happening. You've got the Asian market, which is being held up somewhat in terms of buying in this country. So I think the supply chain will increase significantly, but there's always enough buyers around, but not as many. It won't be as competitive. I don't think people will lose money. I think they just won't get as much as they'd like to get.
Do you think that that's a little bit of a Goldilocks scenario, Tom?
Look, I think if I was a buyer and I'll pick a suburb, say in Summerhill, which is in Sydney, and I'm looking at a unit and I've got a choice of buying an Art Deco unit that's got original features, that is 200 metres from a railway station, or I've got the choice of, in a block of 8 units, or I've got the choice of buying a 2-bedroom unit that's pretty new in a block of 50 that can be reproduced, I would instantly go towards the Art Deco one, because I know that demand and supply says that they just simply don't reproduce that kind of property in a smaller block. And as Charles has indicated, you don't see a shift in real estate prices as what you do in the share market, because if an owner doesn't get their price and they're too much out of pocket, they simply don't sell. They just stick with their property. But what you do see is that you don't see the growth that someone else that would have had that bought another kind of property that was more desirable. So it's going to cost you money because of the opportunity cost you could have, bought elsewhere.
Perhaps we can just switch the focus a little bit before we get to a break. Talk to us about what's happening in regional areas, given the conversations you've been having with your franchisees and the people you're communicating with.
Definitely, the halo effect is still happening and probably will happen for another 6 months. So I think regional areas are a strong place to invest for those people who say, I can't buy in Sydney. Well, that's okay. You don't have to live in Orange or Bathurst or further north or south, but you can buy there comfortably and feel safe and secure in that there will be capital growth. If you look at some of those regions, they're very heavily government funded or government supported. So you can still buy there and rent in Sydney and you can still get the benefit of capital gain. And I think that a lot of people have not looked at that, and those regional areas, in my view, have got a tremendous amount of opportunity. We called the South Coast at the start of last year as an area to buy, and now that they've run out of stock down there, and they're struggling to get good.
Well, that's what my
properties.
question was. Is that sort of already been done? I mean, I think that a lot of people have thought about moving to those easy to tick off places. Nowra, Orange, Bathurst. Do you have to keep looking further and further and further?
Yeah, well, I won't say too much about Nowra because Charles has got an investment towards that area,
okay,
Kangaroo Valley.
Yes, a lovely spot. Keep going.
So I won't. But what I will say is this, Nadine. When we talk about regional areas, I also like to think that there's a subset of regional. You've got regional rural and you've got regional coastal. So you turn around and say, like at News Corp, we consider our Gold Coast Bulletin publication a regional publication. Cairns, a regional. Geelong, a regional. And what's interesting is that you find that places that are regional, that are near water, do better than regional country rural type properties where there's an oversupply. I think Australians love the water. I think Australians have a love affair with property, and when the market's good in Sydney and Melbourne, you generally find that the Gold Coast is doing good. You find that Noosa's doing good.
Have you seen some of the properties like down the south coast, some of the water or views of the ocean and the mountains? They're absolutely stunning, absolutely magnificent. And people have just kept away from these areas, but you go down there, and now, of course, some of the areas like Berry are very upmarket, and people are spending a lot of money in those areas.
When it comes to investment properties in places like that, do people buy them as investment properties for vacation letting often, or is it usually still for the rental market?
It's usually for discretion. They want to live, they'll have their farm in those areas, but pretty high prices are being paid. But Nadine, the views are stunning. You park your car in some of those spots and you would pay squillions in most places to get that outlook.
Gerringong comes to mind. We've got a spot that we park and you can literally just look down the hill, and they're just being developed now. I haven't been there, I should say, as a caveat, for about 8 months.
But they've got a winery down there too, which the girls are down there. Amy and Vicky are down there looking after the property.
So it's in the order. It's Kiama.
You're up working.
It's Kiama, then Gerringong, isn't it? Is that the the order? And then Berry before that.
No, Berry comes after.
After Gerringong.
And then you come into now.
Yeah. Well, they're. I mean. As you both indicated, the South Coast, it was always thought of Terrigal's a place to go. North, the Worms water. South Coast was the poor sister of the coast, and now you have a look at what's going on in those areas.
The road, the freeway, is bypassing most of these areas, especially Berry. You can sit there on a weekend for an hour and a half in traffic just trying to get through 2 or 3 kilometres. But now that bypass is coming through, and that always opens up areas. When you can get to the Blue Mountains where I live, you go to Katoomba, it used to be a weekend trip to get there. Now you can get anywhere from anywhere on the freeways to the top of the Blue Mountains in 2 hours. It's a day trip. And so when that starts to happen and people will commute, they don't mind commuting, when the traffic, the road system is very good. So a lot of changes. So I'd look for that, look for infrastructure, look for roads, and also look for areas that are government funded.
Okay, we'll pick up the conversation after the break. My guest panel will stick around. We'll find out what the trends are telling us when it comes to rates as well in 2017. Back in just a moment.
What's wrong with Angie?
He's not well, mate.
We've got to do something.
Inspirations paint.
It's Loungy, our lounge room paint project. I think Loungy here needs lots of fresh ideas and attention. What about an industrial meets Oxford scheme? I'll take you through each step to make sure you get a great finish.
Kitty!
When your garden hose has no more flow and it's given up the ghost. When your sprinkler's pour its winkler and stutters as it goes. When your time has lost its tick and you think it needs the flick. If there's leaks and pops that just won't stop, no worries, don't lose hope. 'Cause there's a better way to water, a better way to water, yeah, the better way to water is a hope.
Specs or shades? How about both? Get 2 pairs of designer glasses for $199, including a second pair of prescription sunglasses. And if you're with a major health fund, there's no gap. Should have gone to Specsavers.
Michael, when it comes to the stock market, how do you aim to get the best results?
Well, Nick, it's simple. It comes down to strategy, information and timing.
Michael Kadari, you built a reputation for picking star stocks. How do you do it?
Well, it's our precision that makes the difference for you. Go to cosec.com.au and register for your free report.
With COSEC, invest with a solid strategy. Receive cutting-edge information covering some of the best opportunities. Pick the correct opportunity at the right time. Timing is everything. Trade with a segregated account, your own individual account with all your holdings on a CHESS-sponsored HIN. Work in a partnership with us to grow your wealth. Work with a professional client advisor, an expert in the stock market. When COSEC talks, everyone listens.
0% on purchases with 0% on balance transfers from NAB for 15 months made it easier for Lisa to say yes to Laura's wedding. Because life happens.
NAB credit cards. Apply now.
For muscle and back pain relief, choose a gel that treats the inflammation. Unlike heat rubs, Voltaren Emulgel is an anti-inflammatory. It penetrates the skin to relieve the pain and get you moving sooner. Try Voltaren Emulgel.
Welcome back to Your Property Empire. I'm joined at the desk by Tom Panos, Head of Real Estate Advertising at News Corp, and Charles Tarbey. He's Chairman and owner of Century 21 Australasia. You'll recognize them both from the program earlier. I'm not Chris Gray, just filling in with him tonight. And there's plenty to talk about, even though it's a quiet time of year in many ways. Not good news for first home buyers to start 2017, especially singles on the East Coast, with a squeeze on stock numbers and prices soaring sky high. ME Loans is starting to see that squeeze reflected in its loan book, with applications by singles falling by 9 points to 35% in the last 2 years. The bank's average mortgage application for singles has jumped 9% to $355,000 in the same period. So ME's head of home loans, Patrick Nolan's advice is, if you're single, to team up with someone you're not romantically involved with, or alternatively, arrange a pre-approved home loan to save time looking at unaffordable properties. Well, he would say that, wouldn't he? Let's bring in my guest host for their opinions on some of those trends. Tom, spare a thought for the poor first home buyer through the past however many years. Is it going to get any easier for them this year?
I think look, that's guesswork at this time of the year. It's hard to tell, but those comments there that you were reading were mostly in reference to Sydney and Melbourne, and there's nothing to suggest that it's going to get much easier. It might not get much harder, but there's no suggestion that if the house or the unit you wanted to buy was $800, you're going to buy it for $700. What we might think it'll happen is, instead of it going from $800 to $900, it might go to $850. So it doesn't mean it's going to get easier. And the comments about, I see it. I auction a lot of property in Newtown, Chippendale, Darlington. They're most of my auctions on Saturdays, right? So, Nadine, I do see people that are not romantically involved, that look like they're school friends, and after they've signed a contract, they'll say, yeah, we're buying it together. And I can see how there's benefits, but I've also seen when I rock up to do an auction where I see that the two people are sitting at separate parts of the room and they say, we just want to get out of this partnership. So I think that there's pros and cons in it.
Absolutely.
Oh, gosh, I've done auctions over the years, as you know, and I had one where divorced husband in one corner, wife in the other, and he yelled out, we'll take it, and she said, no, you won't. And then it started, you know, and I can't even use some of the words that were being used. But Nadine, look, my biggest issue with this is that a lot of people think you can't buy in Sydney. You still can buy in Sydney. You've just got to stop following the hotspots, and you've got to stop trying to buy in areas where you want to live. There are some very average areas in the Sydney market, but Sydney itself is a great place to buy in. And even if you're buying it in a street where there was a shooting, or a shooting every second week for last month, and all you ever hear is bad news, that's not an area you should avoid, because a lot of people keep away from those areas. And I think there are still a significant number of suburbs in the Sydney market where you can still buy it. It may not be where you want to live right now, but it will change.
And we're all talking about this from an investment perspective as well. I guess if we look at other themes for 2017, last year we saw plenty of new technologies, you know, being utilised in the real estate space. I guess, do you anticipate there'll be much more you know, innovation when it comes to this? How wary do people have to be when they get on some of these bandwagons in the market?
Well, so Charles, today I had an agent ring me up, and Nadine, there's a company called Purple Bricks that he said to me, I've read a report that Purple Bricks has launched in Sydney today, and Purple Bricks is a company from overseas. Most of their work's in the UK, which it's pretty much a do-it-yourself, sell your home. So some people will say that that's going to be something that's going to be around real estate in 2017 and see what effect it'll have. Things such as virtual tours, the glasses that people wear to look at property, you know, they're obviously going to improve and be more available to consumers. There's the vendor advocate sites where someone can go in and ask a company who's the best agent that I use with.
And they're really damaging too, in the sense, because they're not representing their position very, very strongly. They're saying, look, we'll find the best agent for you. We use this company and they got us the best price. But what they do is they'll advertise, and then they'll go out, if you put an inquiry in, they'll go out and they'll find an agent that's prepared to pay them up to 20% of the commission to bring it back to the person. There are a whole range of areas that misrepresent their position terribly. But I actually think that the biggest problem we have in the industry is not any of those disruptors. It's agents' inability to either negotiate or for the people to find the right agent to negotiate for them. It's not about the commission. It's getting an agent who can get you the best possible price. And if you have an agent like that, they're absolutely worth paying as much as 2 or 3 times in.
Well, you would say that, wouldn't you, Charles?
Well, that's right. I have to. You think about it from this point of view, though. If an agent's charging $4,000 commission, what's their incentive to negotiate on your behalf to get you the best possible price?
Well, which is why I think that in other marketplaces in North America in particular, they have, you know, commission-free sort of setups where, yes, you can advertise your own home, or low commission agents where they get a very small commission just for the advertising portion of things. Yeah, I mean, I guess it all comes down to value in the eye of the beholder.
They're all there, and would I use one? Absolutely not. I'd pick an agent that can negotiate, market my property, present it effectively, look who the buyers are, put them into a position where they negotiate against each other to better my price. That's real. It's nothing to do with me being a real estate agent or anything of that nature. That's the fact. It's just got to be like that. It's just Got to be that way.
And as we move into 2017, we cannot get away from interest rates. Of course, NAB, we've mentioned it already, hiking several of its fixed home loan rates, pointing the finger at higher funding costs. The bank is raising rates on 2-, 3-, and 4-year fixed rate packages for new loans. NAB says the cost of providing fixed rate loans has increased over recent months, and it's continuing to watch market and economic conditions. So fixed rates on 1-year owner-occupier and investment home loans will be decreased. And after a long summer break and an eventful one at that, the RBA meets for the first time come February, and there are reports that potential rate hikes have prompted a drop in auction rates compared to the same time last year for all 3 eastern states. We talked about this earlier. Realestate.com.au's data begs to differ, with 45 auctions listed in New South Wales last weekend, with 29 of those selling. And the plot thickens as Bell Property Australasia's CEO Peter Hanscom telling the AFR they are starting the financial year off strong with a 14% increase across their entire network. So that's a bit of the news out there from Propertyland today. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on this interest rate scenario. First of all, we've already talked about some of those rates being hiked by the banks independent of the Reserve Bank cycle. Do you think, Charles, there's going to be an interest rate hike potentially coming from the RBA this year?
If they don't, I think the banks will. I think somewhere in there was a report out just recently about what would it look like if interest rates were reduced, and they're talking about price hikes in Sydney, Melbourne. Now, I really do think that the banks, and they've already started indicating that they're going to make changes, and they did with the interest rate hikes already. And if the RBA doesn't do it, I think the banks will.
Okay.
I don't see a rate drop.
Just one bold prediction for 2017 coming from you, Tom.
That smart people will buy property.
And who will they use, Tom? Go on.
All right, on that note, gentlemen, thank you for coming in. It's a pleasure talking with you both. That's all we have for today. Chris Gray will be back in the chair next Monday. I'm Nadine Blaney. Thanks for watching.
The information featured in this program is general in nature and therefore should not be relied upon. Guests appearing on the program may have commercial arrangements with some of the companies mentioned. Before making any investment, insurance or financial planning decisions, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you.